Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both, and definitely a very tense week here in the community.
I think it has been a long week for a lot of people, Tanya.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those weeks where it felt like Friday on Tuesday, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Well, let's dive right in and talk about what's been happening in our little slice of paradise. Would you like to go over what's coming to this week's cover story?
Yeah, Tanya, I think much of Humboldt County news media spent most of the last week covering what's been going on the Cal Poly Humboldt campus, specifically the pro-Palestinian protesters who occupied Siemens Hall for a good chunk of the week. And so this week's cover story is kind of diving into that, really trying to put together a solid timeline of events from the moment protesters first entered the building to when they were cleared by a massive law enforcement presence from campus on very, very early Tuesday morning, about 3:30. And so what we really tried to do is give kind of as complete a picture as possible from all sides of this thing. So I again, over the course of a handful of days on campus, talked to a number of protesters, a number of students who weren't involved in the protest, and trying to get a kind of a sense of both what the protesters were trying to accomplish, how they viewed the administration's response, and then also how just kind of students who were kind of collateral damage, for lack of a better term, whether people want to view that as collateral damage of administration's choices or collateral damage of the protesters' choices. There was big impacts to students who were uninvolved, and so we wanted to try to capture that too. And just kind of a brief timeline for folks who weren't following this or maybe kind of picked up coverage of it partway through. The protest started on Monday, April 22nd, and it was planned to coincide with the beginning of Passover, the Jewish holiday. And what I was told is a group of protesters, a few dozen, had gotten together the prior Sunday and really felt compelled to take some kind of action to bring awareness to the war in Gaza, particularly the just devastating impacts on Palestinians living there. Latest death tolls are 34,000, with local health officials saying that's mostly women and children, civilians, and just a humanitarian crisis that's been growing for months and alarming kind of every international agency that involved with such things. And so they felt like it was incumbent upon them to do something to try to raise awareness and make this more of a conversation on campus and in the local community, and potentially even push Cal Poly administration to make some sort of statement in favor of a ceasefire or something like that. And so what I was told is they went into Siemens Hall that afternoon looking to have an open occupation, kind of a sit-in that would start with a Seder dinner, again in kind of a nod to the Passover holiday. And they told me they'd never intended to close the building or have it barricaded off. What they envisioned really was an ongoing occupation where, students could come and go into classes. They wouldn't be disruptive. Administrators could come and go. But their presence there over time would just bring kind of an increased awareness. At some point Monday afternoon, we were unable to determine who, despite lots and lots of inquiries to the university and the California State Chancellor's office, somebody decided that they needed to be cleared from the building. And so a law enforcement presence came, ordered them to leave the building. They refused, and then law enforcement attempted to enter the building to forcibly remove them. At which point there was a very, very tense standoff at the main entrance to Siemens Hall. with the police with riot shields and riot gear trying to push their way into the building, protesters trying to physically prevent them from entering, and some blows thrown. One protester in particular was seen bashing a police officer over the head with one of those plastic water jugs, those 5-gallon jugs. And officers were seen in videos hitting protesters with nightsticks and in one case throwing kind of elbow blows. So this continued for several minutes, really tense. At some point, somebody decided the officers should back off, and they kind of withdrew from the building, at which point students barricaded all of the entrances and holed up inside. Then law enforcement kind of stood down, and such commenced kind of this 8-day occupation of a portion of campus, although Siemens Hall was not kind of cordoned off for the entire time. And there's just a lot of kind of rhetoric from both sides about demands, about what could be given to protesters, and what to be done about it until, again, over the weekend, or Friday into the weekend, the campus announced kind of a hard closure, and that they were going to shift all courses online until for the end of the semester. And kind of ordered students living on campus to stay in their residence halls and only frequent dining facilities, but not go out in the rest of campus, and threatened anybody kind of entering the heart of campus with citation or arrest. That wasn't really enforced, however, until very early Tuesday morning, when law enforcement officers were brought from a whole host of agencies throughout the state to clear the campus, and kind of a very coordinated mass effort that began about 9:30 Monday night, but then only really came when officers in riot gear physically walked through the campus at about 3:30 Tuesday morning. So that's the very rough outline of kind of how we got here. Yeah.
And I know I've seen some of the statements and you put them in the story. Has there been any talk about whether or not the campus would consider dropping charges? Because I know that they staged a vigil.
Yeah, there have been lots of efforts. The Faculty Association, I think some alumni groups, certainly the pro-Palestinian groups locally have wanted people to put pressure on the campus to drop charges. Campus administration has given no indication that it's going to do that. And ultimately, it's not up to campus administration anyway. It's the Humboldt County District Attorney's Office decision whether to file charges against the protesters. As we know currently, that has not happened. But protesters were booked and released, and cases have been submitted to the Humboldt County District Attorney's Office for review.
Okay. Well, Thad, before we move on to the next item, is there anything else you'd like us to know about the cover story this week?
I think I would just encourage folks to check it out and read it in its entirety, because I do think that there is a lot of kind of nuance in this conversation, and I think it's been presented from various sides in ways that are very kind of narrow, and I think there's just a lot of complexity, and that's what we tried to capture in the cover story.
Thank you so much. And I encourage everybody to pick up this week's edition and read the entire story for yourself. I think you did an excellent job covering the timeline.
I appreciate that.
And with that, would you like to shift to the other piece that we're focusing on for the show this week?
Yeah, Jen and I wrote an editorial this week about leadership at Cal Poly Humboldt throughout this situation, and more specifically what we see as a failure of leadership. And I have to say, kind of at the outset here, we realized this morning that, due to a layout error that was not caught, a significant portion of the editorial is cut off in the print edition of this week. So I'd encourage anybody watching, listening, to definitely go online this week and read the full version of that editorial, because it does have more information about our views on the situation. But as I was kind of thinking about this, over time, it really struck me that this was both a missed opportunity and just really, it seemed to me an unnecessary escalation, and that students protesting on the Cal Poly Humboldt campus is not an unusual phenomenon or a new phenomenon. We wrote, shortly after I arrived here at the Journal back in 2015 about a group of students who occupied the Native American Forum there for 35 days, for more than a month, without any police action. The Occupy Humboldt movement during the Occupy protests of 2011 took root on the Humboldt State campus. So this isn't kind of an unusual thing, and it shouldn't have been really a surprise that this might happen. When traditionally when students have done this, administrators have really seen it as an opportunity to engage and an opportunity to hear students' concerns and to allow students kind of a platform to voice those concerns. And again, it's hard to pinpoint exactly who made the decision to go a different route this time, but ultimately, President Tom Jackson Jr. is the head of the campus and responsible for administration's decisions. And somebody decided to remove these protesters by force from the building. And that resulted, I believe, in kind of the escalation and them barricading the building and the kind of unfolding of what became, understandably a fairly untenable situation in various regards. But that's really, what caused the first dominoes to start tumbling into a direction that led to, a mass law enforcement clearing. And the other thing, I think Jen has something she wants to add, but the other thing I just wanted to say real quick is, and this is also in my mind, the product of President Jackson's leadership, which has not taken communication with the student body, with faculty, with the surrounding community seriously. And, we kind of go through in the editorial that's evidenced by a lot of the public response to his actions here. Is, you have the faculty association saying that, he made decisions without any involvement of their input. You have community leaders reaching out to him. In some cases, like Stacey Schaefer, the city council member in Arcata and the former mayor, reaching out to him with concern about the situation and starting her letter introducing herself because they've never met, which is just kind of mind-boggling considering he's been on campus here for 4 years.
And she's part of Arcata Equity.
That too, absolutely. So, we see this as a failure of leadership in a very specific incident that had, very serious consequences for the campus and the community, but also as emblematic of a larger pattern of failed leadership at the university.
You both highlighted some of the language that was used in the last week as very problematic in de-escalating this situation and how it was presented to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, the thing that really was, and Thad did a great job enumerating all the issues and all of the moments of communication that could have happened, right? All of these missed opportunities. But the thing that stood out to me was, when he referred to everyone involved as being criminals, when they are protesting, they care about something enough to risk arrest, to risk all the negative outcomes and the discomfort and the interruption of their life in order to draw attention to this thing. But to basically just say that this is lawlessness, this is criminality, harkened back to his discussion of Title IX and his bizarre mischaracterization of Title IX as being a tool for keeping things quiet, which was insane. And then also for, discussing people who bring forth allegations of, sexual harassment in particular as being trying to gain some advantage. And it just speaks to a real misunderstanding or a willful misrepresenting of what's happening in front of him. And also, the assumption that any defiance of his order is, ill will and not for a greater cause. It's been wild to see and disappointing. And we started out with, at least among myself and a couple other people, when President Jackson came on board at CPH, but back when it was HSU, he said some things that made us a little bit hopeful about how things would go. And that really has not come to fruition. It's really been a disappointment, and seeing how it worked out here could have been disastrous. It wasn't great, but for someone who has continually stated that that criticizing the university publicly is a bad look, and that we should be, maintaining our secrets and keeping a good image for the school as a community and as for the student body, he's really made it into a spectacle of poor leadership.
Absolutely. I agree. And for all of the blowback that I kept hearing about the vandalism during this whole ordeal, I kept shrugging my shoulders that exactly how this entrenchment started is probably what inflamed the situation to lead to vandalism and things like that. So I'm just like, it is a breakdown of the way that this should have been handled and how it's been handled in the past when these kind of things. This is part of our community, and it's something that we should be proud of, that these students have passions and they want to give those passions voice.
Just one more thing I'll add is, I think as this, even kind of in spite of that initial decision that, that in my opinion, absolutely escalated the situation. It was marked to me that he was just absolutely absent from the conversation as this thing unfolded. We were receiving all of the, both the press releases from the university, but then also all of the notices the university was sending to faculty and staff and students. And his voice was not in any of those. He gave one interview toward the end of the week with the Times Standard, in which he made the comments that Jen was talking about of calling, the protesters criminals, and kind of shrugged off the faculty association's no competence vote in him, saying that they should, concentrate on teaching students. But there was no, at no point did he make any overtures to the campus community directly or to the protesters directly to weigh in on this situation that obviously had paralyzed campus and drawn national attention.
And obviously impacted the small businesses in the commencements, possibly not moving forward and folks not visiting. But I was very shocked to learn from your reporting that at no point was he engaging with the protesters or discussing. I was pretty surprised by that at no point he stepped down there to talk to anybody.
Us too.
Well, as usual, you guys have brought us excellent reporting, and your editorial is very well done. So I encourage everybody to make sure they read this week's articles cover to cover and keep an open mind and look at it from all the different angles that you were able to present. Well, we're going to shift gears over exclusively to Jennifer for our final piece that involves some really positive ways you can spend your taco money this weekend.
My form of activism is eating. And so this is something that I'll say is close to my heart because I come from a family of folks who learned English as a second language. And I have a secret past as an English teacher for people speaking ESL. And there is a nonprofit group that is a pretty amazing, I say group, it's just a little tiny handful of people called English Express. And hey, English Express. So they are, like everything else in this county, an Ink People Dream Maker project. And they have basically free classes that can be in person or online via Chromebooks that students can borrow during the duration of their classes. And it's free English classes. Cost, of course, is a barrier. timing is a barrier, lots of things. When you come to a new country and you have to learn the language, as I have done in other places, it's hard to work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week and learn another language. It's hard to do anytime. And that Duolingo owl is still giving me that look and I don't appreciate it. However, these classes have really made a difference in communities and in people's lives. It's fantastic. Since it started in 2016, and Marianne Heitkin is the woman who kind of like got it started. She used to go into Mexican grocery stores and set up a little table and just teach at a little table for free, one-on-one lessons, which is kind of great. This is really her passion. And since it started, they have not only taught like 500 students going through learning English and also learning the citizenship test questions. You may have heard of this, the 100 questions you have to learn, civics questions you have to learn in order to take the U.S. citizenship test. My mom studied like crazy, and they asked her how many stripes were on the flag. Disappointing. Anyway, it's a great program, and some folks who've been through it or who see the value of it are giving back to it. On Cinco de Mayo, when I know you'll be tempted to like put on a sombrero and take pictures that are going to come back at you, but instead you could be going to one of 17 Mexican restaurants in our county from McKinleyville to Garberville that are going to donate a portion of their proceeds from Cinco de Mayo's sales back to the English Express program. Some of them are alumni. Some of them are folks who have just seen how English Express has improved things for their community, for people who are working. I talked with Letty Gonzalez from the Patron Kitchen. You may recall the Patron Kitchen makes that incredible Cubana sandwich that has everything in the house in it. It's like this top. Letty Gonzalez has been taking classes for like 3 years. And I must tell you that her English was quite good over the phone, though she was feeling a little shy talking to a reporter and so had somebody help her with translation. I don't blame you. It was scary. But she was talking about how much it's helped in terms of being able to, overcome work issues, be able to start a business as she and her husband did. And also she sees her daughter's classmates' parents using the same thing, her friends using the same program. And, being able to take free classes while you're working, it also helps you with, basic things that if you are a native English speaker, you might take for granted, like talking to your kid's teacher. I know that when I was living overseas, that was one of the hardest things for me, was to be able to talk to my kid's teacher and understand what they need from us, how things are going. It can be really difficult, and it's the most important thing. So they've also got lots of ways to help you find programs and things to find. There are lots of services and stuff that I know my family missed out on when they first came to America, partly because they had no way of hearing about them or hearing about them in an accessible way. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of highlights from the list because it's 17 and you can find them listed in the paper or online on our website. But some of my favorites are in there. I don't know if you've been to El Chipotle, but they have a wonderful pambazo sandwich that's dipped in sauce. The El Fogón Costeño used to be a truck, now a brick and mortar in Henderson Center. The shrimp burrito. He also makes a quesadilla pizza. No lie. Las Michoacanas has a fantastic pork stew that you should check out. It's called morisqueta. And then also pachanga. Hey, pachanga in Eureka that makes my very favorite jalapeno poppers in the whole county. But there's plenty of them. There's 17 places and they're all donating to English Express.
See, and this is your excuse. If you weren't going to spend money on Sunday, it's time to get out there and eat for a good cause. Fiesta Cantina, my favorite shrimp and fish tacos in my neighborhood. That's my shout out. Jennifer, thank you for bringing this story to us to balance out the equation this week. And I thank all of you for listening. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick it up and read it today. But you can also find it, and including the full editorial, online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us, staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community.